So season 2 of Dark Winds has come to an end. We got the finale today, and I gotta say my opinion on it is a little bit mixed. On one hand, we got really great endings to the character arcs for this season, and this is a character show first and foremost, so that's the important part of the storyline, and they nail some things at the end. There are a lot of characters that have a transition point at the end of the episode, some really emotional goodbye scenes, and a lot of satisfying conclusions as far as that goes. But when it comes to the main storyline with the case that we're solving, the ending was a little bit unsatisfying. There wasn't really like a twist or any turns or a lot of action per se, and none of it was really unexpected. So it really, on that part of the episode, kind of felt a little underwhelming, and really the characters picked up the episode for me. So I still liked the episode overall, and I hope that we get a season 3 because I love this cast and I want to see more stories with these characters. But I will say overall, I almost wish the season was a little bit longer. We got a little bit deeper into the case. We have a bit more action in there. And comparing it to season 1's finale, which had some good action in it and had a satisfying twist, had something unexpected, had something exciting, and had a conclusion that was literally explosive, it felt a little bit underwhelming compared to that. But I still did enjoy the episode and the season overall. But we're going to get into the breakdown here. So this first scene is probably the most disappointing part of the whole episode to me, where we ended last week with the blonde man, the murderer. Last week we got a backstory for him. We got some flashbacks. There seemed to be something going on with him that we didn't quite understand, and he escaped the police car. He blew it up with his metronome thing. He picked the handcuffs with a pen, we find out in this episode, and then he ends up going to BJ Vine's house. And this first scene here has a little bit of tension. You just know that either the blonde man or BJ Vines is going to be dead by the end of the scene. But that's a little bit disappointing to me because it's so quick after that cliffhanger. It makes that cliffhanger feel pointless in retrospect, especially because last time this guy was missing and out on the lam, we had such an extensive search for this man that went all across the reservation and took up a lot of resources. And this time he gets murdered by BJ Vines at the end of the scene here. BJ Vines seems to help him. He gives him money, he gives him all this stuff, and then he shoots him as he's walking away. And it's like, why didn't he just shoot him right away? Like, why go through all that other than just to give us some dramatic tension? I didn't really get that. Why bother go through this whole rigmarole? Not sure I really understand what's going on there, but maybe it was just because he needed the guy to trust him first, so he didn't pull his gun on him or something. I don't really know, but I mean, it makes sense that BJ Vines would want to kill him because he is a liability at this point. But it just feels underwhelming. It kind of makes the cliffhanger especially feel pointless. And we just forget about him. We just forget about him. There's no attempting to search for this man. They don't even talk about him for the rest of the episode. It just feels like a huge gaping plot hole. I don't understand why they didn't try to find him. I don't know, man. It was weird. Okay, so that's pretty much the most critical of this episode I'm going to be. And it kind of reminded me of, the showrunner or one of the head writers here, John Worth, used to be the showrunner for the show Hell on Wheels, one of my favorite shows. And they did a lot of things on that show that were meant to subvert expectations. And they kind of had similar scenes where you'd think this plotline was going to be continuing on, and then it ends abruptly. The end of the character Elam Ferguson in particular was of that same vein. But you know what? It worked a lot better on that show than it felt there. That just felt like, kind of a cut-off ending that wasn't really satisfying. So, I don't know, that's just the one thing that bugged me the most. So, here we got a scene with the sheriff, and we got Joe Leaphorn coming to visit the sheriff in the hospital, reminiscent of the scene with Chi earlier in the season. He's in the hospital, so the sheriff is thinking about last night and they bring up, have you ever killed anyone before, Leaphorn? And you know that this is the Chekhov's gun. I said it wrong. I forget what I said a few reviews ago, but Chekhov's gun is the concept where if you plant a seed at the beginning of the episode, it has to go off. You know, if there's a gun hanging above the mantle in Act 1, it has to go off by Act 3. So that's the Chekhov's gun in this episode, is that Leaphorn has never killed anybody, and you know by the end of this episode, he is going to kill somebody. And we talk about how when you kill somebody, their soul is linked with yours for the rest of your life and possibly into the next life. So the sheriff tells the story of how somebody basically committed suicide by cop, and he had to be the last person that the man saw. And ever since then, he's never forgotten about that. And he aligns that with his experience last night when the car exploded. He played dead because he didn't want to be the last. He didn't want the killer blonde man to be the last person that he sees. So he didn't want to be linked to that guy in the same way. So it was a powerful scene, really great monologue, and you could feel the emotions in the scene. And I thought it was very well written and executed. So I like that scene a lot. And here we got Chi. He's back on the case. And I was very happy to see by the end of this episode, he puts the police uniform on. And that was a good time as any to talk about how I kind of felt like I like Chi having to transition, you know, that he was trying to do something different. 1 foot in, 1 foot out. He's not just in the same cop position that he was last season. But at the same time, it kind of felt like he was underutilized this season. This should be the number 2 character. We really like this guy. And he kind of felt like he was a B-plot. And it wasn't until, you know, these last couple episodes that his storyline really converged with the main storyline. So maybe a bit underwhelming, but I do hope that we get him back in the next season. I hope season 3 happens. I really do. But yeah, that's just overall this season. I would have liked to see more from Chi. But I did like this scene here where basically BJ Vines pulls up. You know, Chi's looking for the wife or the maid. That it turns out last week I couldn't figure out who the woman was that was with Mrs. Vines. It turns out it was the maid. I didn't recognize her, but everybody else did apparently. So I'm glad all you guys pay more attention. Okay, I appreciate you guys. But here we got Chi getting offered blood money by BJ Vines. BJ Vines pulls up. He was just burying the blonde man. He doesn't even really try to hide it. He's got dirt on his shoes. He pulls the shovel out from the back seat. He's a very cocky guy for reasons we'll get into later in the episode. He knows he's not going to get into trouble with the law. He doesn't really care. So he doesn't feel the need to hide anything. He's trying to buy off Chi. He gives him money for nothing. And he's threatening him basically with his demeanor is itself a threat. Just the fact that, yeah, I was burying a body. I don't care. Chi, of course, at this point thinks it's his wife, but it actually turns out, of course, not to be because, you know, at the end of the ceremony with People of Darkness last week, you know, Mrs. Vines is gone. We don't know where she is. So that's really what he's trying to find out here. So, but basically the demeanor itself is a threat, and that is, you know, the point of this scene. Cheese kind of speculates that even though he doesn't really believe in witches, this guy adopting the culture of the Dene, he's got a big problem with that, with the People of Darkness. And he says that he believes BJ Vines is a witch. And at first, when I watched this scene, I thought he was speaking symbolically. Of course, we know based on last season, there is supernatural things happening on the reservation. We know that that's a part of this world, of this show, that there is that witchcraft stuff going on. I've talked about before, I would prefer the show to stay grounded and realistic because everything else in the show is. But we already have that element established, so that is a part of this here. But I thought he was being figurative, just saying, you know, spiritually this guy's a witch, he's a bad person. But by the end of the episode, when we have a scene with him and Bernadette saying goodbye, he basically kind of insinuates that he's starting to believe in these things now. So he is transitioning in that sense as well. So I think he is being literal here, that he thinks BJ Vines does have some sort of abilities, or some type of witchcraft going on. Here we got another really good scene with Henry. We got Leaphorn's father, and he's the bomb expert in the area. So they go to investigate the oil explosion, and they're trying to find debris from the bomb. Henry talks about how bomb makers, they get a signature, they have the same way of making every bomb, and they need to find debris to basically attach it to the blonde man to really prove that it was him. And that's what goes on in this scene. It's a very satisfying scene, but part of it's like, why didn't we do this earlier? I did like the atmosphere of the scene, searching for everything, when we get wide shots pulling back and we see the barbed wire on the fence and we see Leaphorn through that. There's a lot of stuff I like in the scene, but it's like, why didn't we investigate this 4 years ago? Like, shouldn't they have found the stuff? Why didn't they clean up the debris around? I don't know what you guys think, but maybe just the fact that they're understaffed and don't have a lot of resources is just the reason, but I don't know. So anyway, we're back with Chi at his hotel, I suppose, is where he's at now. And he's going through the stuff that he found in the bag at the People of Darkness gathering last week. Rosemary came, or no, not Rosemary, the maid came out with this bag and a bunch of stuff in it. And now he's looking through that. It took me a second to be like, where is this stuff where did it come from? But it's a bunch of the Charlie stuff, Thomas Charlie. And he finds pictures that are undeveloped in there. Basically, it was evidence that hasn't been destroyed yet, which we'll get back to more of that later. But part of it's like, why didn't they just destroy that stuff earlier? Why were they storing it? But we get a scene with BJ Vines that kind of explains that later. Here we got a scene with Henry again. He's in the police station, and he talks about how BJ Vines is kind of above the law because of the justice system being biased toward rich people, because basically BJ Vines spent a lot of money to get this particular judge elected, because we have elected judges in many jurisdictions here in the United States, and same with sheriffs. That's one of the themes, is there's several people who are in elected positions here, politicians, you would say. So these people need money to get elected, and basically that's how corruption happens, is once you accept a great amount of money from somebody who's rich, you're beholden to them in some way. And that's part of the reason why BJ Vines is throwing around money constantly, is he wants to own people. It's like a deal with the devil type of thing. So that's definitely a symbolic undercurrent throughout this episode. And this is still true to this day. It's how the justice system works. We have two justice systems in this world. Basically, in this show, it's like Indian justice versus white justice, as Henry puts it here. But really, it's just in life today, at least, it's rich versus poor. The wasps go free, and the little bugs get caught. is the phrase we use. So that's just the truth of the world. So I think it's good to have in this show here. So basically, Henry predicts that he's going to walk because of the corruption, and they want to believe in it, so that they continue to investigate. So they find the original, the photos that were developed. Turned out Thomas Charlie was in fact cheating, or Rosemary was cheating on her husband with Thomas Charlie. And Thomas Charlie had a photo of the original document that was doctored, that was attempted to be burned by the blonde man and only partially got burned. So that is the motive for all the murders going on, is this secret getting out. But we already knew that, so it wasn't really like a twist, so it didn't feel satisfying. Although it is kind of satisfying because it's like progress. But I was hoping for something a little bit unexpected, another type of twist, but that's just not what we have in store for this story here. So we're going to arrest BJ Vines, and he's, I skipped past that scene because he's naked in it, but he gets arrested in his robes. They don't let him get dressed, and then they just send him to jail. So you're hoping that that's the end of that, but of course it isn't. Here we got the ending of this storyline with the reporter. She has written the story about Emma trying to save people from being sterilized like she was, and she talks about how it should have been her choice whether or not to have another child, not anyone else's. and it's a powerful scene. And I think it's an important storyline because it really did happen, and it's just something tragic that needs to be addressed. So I really like that scene there. But it kind of felt like an underwhelming storyline because at first it was like, no, I don't want to help you. And then I guess Sally is the gateway. But just because it's only 6 episodes this season, it didn't really feel as organic. It just kind of felt like it moved along on a schedule. So, that's just a factor of the fact that we only have 6 episodes in a season. It's really not enough for something with this many moving parts to make every part of the storyline feel satisfying. Another example is Rosemary here felt a little bit underutilized this season. Just kind of an intriguing femme fatale type of character, and it kind of felt like there was more going on with her, but there really wasn't. So, but anyways, in this scene here, she is without the breathing apparatus, the oxygen that she's been carrying all season, and it's partially because of the People of Darkness meeting that she went to yesterday. She asked her husband to cure her. So maybe BJ Vines does in fact have some sort of witchcraft abilities. However, she ends up needing the oxygen just because she gets stressed out by this interaction. So how much was she cured is an open question at this point, if she even was at all. Maybe it's all mental. But anyways, basically Chi has figured her out that she was having an affair, and she wanted him to find the box to basically stop her affair from getting exposed. And she also wanted her husband to get arrested, and the important evidence that would do that was in the box. She's trying to be free of her husband because her husband is a possessive psycho. So I don't even necessarily blame her for that, based on what we've seen BJ Vines do. But she's a shady person because she married her sister, her dead sister's husband, which is just a little weird, right? So she's a shady person. She tries to convince Chi to come along with her to the same place that she went with Thomas Charlie in the collection of stuff. I forget what the place was called, but Appa something. So the place that she went with him, she wants Chi to go there. Chi kind of realizes that, she just has like some type of thing for Dene people or Indian people in general. So I don't know, but he says, there are other brown people there to help you with your luggage. It's definitely a diss. She and BJ kind of had this weird fetishization of the lifestyle of the Dene people. So that's just the fact that they live in a house that has all of these paraphernalia, and they're adopting their spiritual practices except perverting it. That's pretty much exactly who she is too. So, and then here, as she's smoking a cigarette, she says, who's going to believe your story, all that thing you said in there? I'm such a frail person, almost like she maybe never really needed the oxygen that much, and it's just a part of her narrative that she needs to uphold her image so that in court, if she ever gets called in, nobody's gonna believe the accusations against her, because how could she do this? She is so sick and frail and all this stuff, and that's basically another threat, kind of similar to how BJ Vines is throwing threats around. So here we got a nice family scene with Sally, and we got there's a story about the leaves of grass. She wanted to read a book of poems about from Walt Whitman, but couldn't find it, but ended up finding it in another way. Like she found a bunch of grass in her pouch or something. So I think there's definitely something symbolic there. Maybe we don't find justice in the way it's meant to be found. We find it in a different way. Maybe is the symbolism there, because we do get justice against BJ Vines by the end of the episode in the Indian way. So I'm really curious to see what you guys think of that, if that's why. But basically, Joe makes the baby laugh, and that is a transition point in the spiritual beliefs of the Dene. That is the point the baby goes from being in the spirit realm to a real person. Really interesting concept, and I like that we sprinkle this stuff in, so I get to learn about the culture, and I think that's a really beautiful concept. And I love that, laughter is the essence of life. I love that. And we have, at the same time that that's happening, we have a really dark thing happening inside Leaphorn that he is going to end up taking a life by the end of the episode. So he gave a life to the baby at the same time he is about to go take another life. So he feels responsible for giving the life to the baby, he says. So he feels a responsibility. That baby is now like clung to him spiritually, same way that we talked about killing somebody earlier in the episode, that life is going to be clung to him as well. So that is, I think, really what they're going for in this scene. So it's a sweet scene, and then he sees a news report that BJ Vines has been released from prison, and you see the realization in his eyes that his father was right and that BJ Vines is going to get away with everything because of the corruption of the legal system. So he decides he's going to take matters into his own hands. And here we got the scene with Leaphorn and BJ Vines. And BJ Vines just feels invincible because of how much money he has, basically. And he denies everything, although he kind of insinuates the reason why he made the accident happen during the day instead of at night. That's what Leaphorn's question is, like, why do people have to die for this? Why couldn't you just kill or blow the thing up at night to achieve your goals instead of killing people? BJ Vine says it's an accident. People died. It's an accident. Basically, nobody would believe that it was an accident unless people died, because you need to take a life, basically, to make that part of the story believable. So that's the straw that broke the camel's back. And also Leaphorn found the metronome on the desk, and he talks about how the things in the safe were all trophies. All of these crimes that he committed, he keeps those things. It's not logical for him to do so, because it means that he might down the line end up facing consequences for that. But basically, he keeps them as trophies because he feels invincible. He wants to have something to prove to himself that he did that. He wants to feel powerful, and that's how he does that. So I think that that's a powerful symbol, and I think that that's how a lot of people really would think. Although it's not the most logical thing, so it does make undercut him as an antagonist a little bit, but this is the end of the rope for BJ Vines. So basically, Leaphorn has him on the ground. He has the gun to his head, and you'll notice in this scene, he doesn't let BJ Vines face him. He has him facing the other way, and that is, I think, because of what the sheriff said to him earlier. He doesn't want to be the last thing that this man sees. So he doesn't end up shooting him. But and he tells the story about the long walk. I was wondering what that was. A few episodes ago, he talked about an ancestor of his that died because of going on the long walk. And there's an end to that story, that he ended up at an army base or a fort of some kind and getting offered rotten food, and that's how he died. Basically, it was a trail of tears. People being forced to walk through the desert barefoot by corrupt government again. So recurring themes there. So he basically wants BJ Vines to go through the same thing, and he wants him to experience the spirits in the desert that people like him, corrupt people, have caused the deaths of. So basically, that's what he does. He kills him by the cold, basically, leaving him out in the wilderness. So I would have liked to see a hint of some type of consequence. Maybe if they are going for BJ Vines had some type of witchcraft, I would have liked to see something negative happen as a result of that to Leaphorn, or him deal with the guilt of that in some way. They kind of hint at it a little bit, but I would have liked to see, it's not just all roses now that BJ Vines is dead. There should be some type of consequences. But I think they wanted to end this episode as if maybe season 3 wasn't going to happen. So they gave us a lot of satisfying things at the end here. Basically, from this point on to the end of the episode, I loved every scene. This scene here is really satisfying. This scene is him symbolically letting go of his son, right? He melts down the belt buckle into like a feather that he makes, a little piece of art. And then there's a song playing, and he is able to embrace his wife, basically. For the song basically hints at that it's been a while since he's done that. So it definitely kind of heals something between them. Here we see BJ Vines kind of freezing to death, and I was half expecting something to happen, like somebody to find him or something, but nothing happens. He just dies. We got this ceremony here with the Sally's baby, and it's the coming to life ceremony. I don't know what it's actually called, but the sheriff comes in the middle of it, and he basically tells Leaphorn that he's retiring. That's the first thing. And he says it's either that or get a divorce. So I'm thinking that the hint there is because of the accident that he was just in, his wife was saying, I can't be worrying about you at this stage. You need to give it up because it's too dangerous, and we need to just live out the rest of our days in peace. And that's pretty much what he does. And then he says BJ Vines didn't, or has a warrant out for his arrest because he skipped bail, which doesn't even make sense. It seems like the sheriff knows that Leaphorn maybe had something to do with it, and it kind of seems like it's somebody else's problem. He doesn't care about it. Oh, and I forgot to mention, I've been saying all season how the sheriff is kind of trying to avoid getting into dangerous situations. He wants things to be wrapped up nice and cleanly. And I said before, it seemed like kind of laziness. I was wrong about that. Now that I see this scene where he mentions his wife, and they mentioned her earlier in the hospital scene as well. So his relationship with his wife is why he was behaving that way. It wasn't out of his own personal concern. So it definitely adds another dimension to his character that I appreciate. But basically, he seems to know that Leaphorn has something to do with it, but he's not going to pursue that. And he says to Leaphorn, if I was you, I would run. And at first you're thinking, okay, he definitely knows that Leaphorn's in on the BJ Vines disappearance. But he then finishes the sentence, say, run for the sheriff office, right? It's because he's going to retire, another election's going to happen, and he's saying that Leaphorn is a candidate. And also, I don't know if he's maybe insinuating that, by phrasing it that way, that him becoming the sheriff would be a way of washing his own sins away, because if he is the sheriff who is dutifully elected, that would mean that he would have a purview over his own case, BJ Vine's disappearance, so he would be able to cover his tracks as the person in charge. So again, that's government corruption right there. And basically, Leaphorn corrupted his soul by doing the Indian justice. So I think that's what I was referring to earlier when I said they hint at some consequences. So I think it's a dense scene. There's a lot in there. It's on the surface very simple, but there really is a lot going on there. And you can tell that the sheriff knows, or at least they want you to think that. So I thought that was a really good scene. And then we got Henry looking on. So Henry is looking at his son. And then Leaphorn, Joe says, how long have you been there? And then Henry says, your whole life. So meaning, even though Henry had issues with decisions that Joe had made to stay in the reservation and have the same job that he did, they had that conflict, but still Henry was looking on. He always cared about his son, and his life always mattered to him. But it also means that Henry knows what Joe did. He knows that BJ Vines is missing, and he knows, based on what he said about Indian justice, he knows, he's clued in on what Joe did. He knows. So again, like I said, simple scene on the surface, a lot going on under the surface, and I really appreciate it. So we got a scene, another ritual scene, and we got Bernadette and she kind of making up. And then we have just kind of a really nice, beautiful scene. And then we have the scene here with Bernadette. And she said, as a result of BJ Vines going free based on the judicial system, she was going to accept the job at Border Patrol. She doesn't want to deal with criminal stuff anymore. She wants to go on to bigger and better things. But really, it's more of an escape than it is what she's going to. She wants to leave the situation here. So I think it's a beautiful scene, and Leaphorn calls her daughter by the end of the scene, and he's going to say something like "I'm proud of you" or "I love you" or something, but she cuts him off and says "I know," and there's that unspoken father-daughter bond there that I think was really beautiful, and you really feel a lot of the emotions in these scenes. Then we got Sally. Basically, she leaves an envelope, presumably with some money in it, and then she takes her baby and she goes. She's has her freedom now. So I like that she had a bit of a story arc. She felt trapped and then she escapes. But again, that's one of those things. If we had more time in the season, we could have really dwelled on that a bit more. But it kind of just feels, a little bit rushed along. But I understand why it's like that. But I like the way that that ends. And here we got the goodbye scene between she and Bernadette, and they're teasing each other about her big feet, his little hands, but basically it's a bittersweet goodbye, and Chi has decided to stay, and meanwhile Bernadette is leaving for basically the same reason. Chi feels like he has to stay. But they embrace, they kiss, and it's a tragic goodbye. And then she's driving away, and we end on the symbol of the feather in the car. Basically, the feather that Leaphorn made with his son's belt buckle is hanging from her rearview mirror, meaning that she has inherited the son's relationship with his father, and she is going out into the world and basically doing what Henry wanted for Joe. So what Henry wanted for Joe was to go out into the world and do bigger things than what he did, and she is inheriting that journey through the feather, and that's where she's off to. So I don't know if we're going to get season 3. I hope so. But I'm a bit surprised to see Bernadette actually leaving. So if they do make a season 3, is she going to have her own storyline in the Border Patrol, and that's going to cross paths with Leaphorn in the reservation at some point? I would tend to think so, unless they just did this to write her off because the actress doesn't want to return in a starring role next season. But I have a feeling if the show does come back that we haven't seen the last of Bernadette, and I certainly hope not, because she's a character that I really like. So lots to break down in this episode, and it felt like a pretty good review. Let me know your guys' thought in the comment section below. How are you feeling about the season overall? And with that, it's been your boy Shuggy. We got Walking Dead Daryl Dixon next week. Really excited about that show coming out. And we're playing Starfield on stream, so definitely if you're around this weekend and you want to see some Starfield streaming, your boys got you covered. Definitely hit the sub button and notifications and all that, and I hope to see you guys there. But with that, it's been your boy Shuggy. We'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching, everybody. Peace out.